What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here on our podcast, What's Going On in Pop Culture right now. This one took a little longer for me to finish this week because we had to wait for Andor Season 2, the final season, to conclude. A ton to get into with that. Also, double dose of Star Wars this week because we have to talk about Tales of the Underworld, the animated anthology series that I was able to get to, as well as HBO's The Righteous Gemstones, fourth and final season, and new music from Bibi, Meovv, and PinkPantheress. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Meovv's debut EP, My Eyes Wide Open. Meovv, of course, the new first girl group debuting on the Black label last year in September with their breakout single of the same name. That is, of course, Meovv spelled with two V's, My Eyes Wide Open, two V's once again. It's a gimmick, but at least they're being consistent with it, whatever. But yes, Meovv is back, and since that debut single in September, they released two additional songs, Body and Toxic, and then the lead up to this EP, the lead single, Hands Up. All of that's to say, 4 songs were already out. We get this project and we realize all those songs are on this, and there's only 2 additional new songs. So really, this is not a lot of new material for Meovv, and unfortunately, that feels just like what we come to expect from YG Entertainment and the Black label. Sparse releases, just infrequent output. This is what happened with Blackpink. This is what's seemingly happening with Baby Monster, at least a little bit, and it's certainly happening with Meovv. Now, they've only debuted 8 months ago. 6 songs in 8 months, that's not unreasonable, but let's see what happens in September of this year and if they actually have any additional songs out by then. I'm kind of skeptical. And yeah, just to get ahead of the comments, because I talked about that first song, Meovv, when it came out last September, and I wasn't super impressed because I thought it came across as pretty derivative to a lot of YG sounds in terms of the in-house production style that's grown quite familiar, and just a lot of the quirks you come to expect from Teddy Park. And the Black label is a subsidiary of YG, owned by Teddy, but also owned in a minority stake by YG. Teddy still signed to YG. The music sounds like YG music. This is YG music. I don't know why a lot of people have a sticking point when it comes to that, but that's just how it is. And Teddy and everyone else working on this music, not just him, are people affiliated with YG Entertainment. So this is a very distinct section of K-pop that I think people have a opinion of when it comes to the Sonics. Meovv's debut EP, My Eyes Wide Open, continues what's increasingly paramount. Meovv has a lot of vocal talent and inherent versatility as performers. What they are still lacking is creative sonic vision when it comes to the actual music they're making. I continue to not love any of the Meovv songs, even if I can clearly hear their potential. I find a lot of the music still pretty backward looking when you compare it to the history of YG and the Black label sound. And when only half of this EP is actually new material, there's not a lot of opportunity for that opinion to be changed. Of the 3 new songs, Hands Up, Drop Top, and Lit Right Now, I think Lit Right Now is clearly the highlight of the bunch and the best song Meovv has made to this point. Very groovy drums, a little cowbell touch. I think the chorus is very breezy. I love the way the vocal line really hits over that beat. I think when it comes to the Meovv music we have gotten, the hooks have been the strongest. It's just the rest of the songs are always lacking for whatever reason, whether it's sparse verses or uninspired production. Lit Right Now, though, gets closest for that being a full package thus far. And as I said, this is a talented group. You can hear it in the way they sing. These are powerful vocalists. And I think the rapping, when you do get it, it comes across as capable rapping, even if I think sometimes the rap verses are kind of awkwardly placed in some of these songs. You hear this vocal talent. We just need the songs to be better. This sounds a lot like what we've been saying about Baby Monster, where the talent is very obvious, but the songs have not been there consistently. And, is that a YG problem inherently? Probably not, but it's certainly a problem that YG has right now. So we'll see how that goes. I think in terms of the stuff that you'd like about their songs, again, I reviewed Meovv, the single when it came out, but I think the shake some refrain, that vocal refrain, that hook is the best aspect of that song, even if I do find a lot of the production very derivative and the outro pretty weak. Body, I think, was the best of the next two batch of singles they released, Body and Toxic. Toxic, I think the rhythm is just kind of slow. These really airy high notes. The song just doesn't really work for me. It's my least favorite of all their songs to this point. Body, though, again, like, it has a really good hook. The body ooh part, it's sticky, and I think the rap is pretty hard. Like, their attitude as performers is very apparent. I think the outro dance break works a lot better than it does on the Meowv single. That leads us, of course, to Hands Up, which was the lead single from this, comeback period. And I think, Hands Up is something that, like, it's a song I want to like more than I end up doing because, again, I think it kind of falls away from itself. Where you have this really noticeable drum production with these string touches. It comes across as very, like, exotic, I guess you could say. And I like that tempo. And I think the chorus, the Hands Up chorus, again, that hook is probably the best part of it about it. But, like, I think that song really runs out of steam after that first chorus. So it's like, again, like, there's parts of it that I enjoy, but it just doesn't fully come together for me. Drop Top, this one's a bit amusing to me, where it's a slow singing start to the song, and then it really builds itself up to the chorus, and the song really comes alive at that point. I think the drums sound nice. Verse 2, you kind of get a rap verse out of nowhere a little bit. Like, it sounds fine, but like a bit awkward maybe. I do find the song title a bit amusing. Usually when you hear a song called Drop Top, it's a bit more braggadocio and, hard and in your face. But this song actually has a lot of softer singing to it, talking about the drop top being open and the rain falling down. A bit of a switch up from what you expect from that kind of lyricism. And yeah, like I said, Lit Right Now, clearly the best of the bunch. I think the thing too with this group we should keep in mind is, like, the Black Label and YG's reputation these days as being slow movers, slow decision makers, slow with putting out new music. I don't know how much that's going to help this group. It's a competitive space right now for new girl groups, and all the older girl groups are still around making music, and the popularity, it remains. And not that there's not a lot of room, vast room for K-pop fans to enjoy many groups. There certainly is. But I just think, like, you need to kind of keep up with the output game and release music at a brisker pace. And again, 6 songs through 8 months is okay, but we need to see it kind of keep up, because I'm just curious, and I'm going to be watching, like, how big this group is able to get when a lot of their peers are just putting out music more frequently. So yeah, we'll see, like, how that goes. Again, I want the group to be better and make better songs because I can hear the talent. So we'll see. Let me know, what do you think most? What do you like most about Meowv's debut EP, My Eyes Wide Open? What's your favorite song that they put out thus far? What do you want to hear from them next? And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Bibi's second album, Eve Romance. Bibi has been around the last few years, releasing a bunch of singles and whatnot since that first album came out back in 2022. So many singles, in fact, that of Eve Romance's 14 tracks, only 6 of them are actually new and haven't been heard before. That being said, it is great that this is an actual full-length K-pop album, because those things increasingly do not exist, as we just get EP after EP when it comes to new music. And Bibi has been someone who's always interested, or at least intrigued me, because she is a, true soloist and always has been. And also, due to just her label situation, seems to just kind of do her own thing and is really involved in her own artistry, which is pretty cool. She co-wrote and co-produced every song on this album, which is awesome. She's about to embark on her first world tour as well, and actually she was coming to Boston, but I'm going to be away when she's here. A bit of a bummer for me. I totally would have went. That being said, 14 songs, 6 of which are new. Bibi's second album, Eve Romance, is very much an R&B record. Very vibey production, lots of synths, some jazz from time to time, steady drums, Largely, it's pretty down tempo, and when you actually get the more up tempo moments on songs like Sugar Rush, the album really wakes up. But ultimately, I think it's more of a mood piece. You know, Bibi as a vocalist, not this amazing like high range singer by any means, but the type of understated central R&B that she's doing on this album does work pretty well. And I do find the production varied and layered enough to help the album not get into a samey pattern. There's just a lot of great touches with the mixing, with the use of background vocals from time to time. I think it's a really pleasant listen and flows pretty well. The first track, Apocalypse, you have these synths almost giving like a underwater type vibe, and then the song kind of picks back up when the bass drops. The second song, Hongdae R&B, has I think a really groovy chorus, nice combination of keys with some snares. Meat, very jazzy. I mean, there's literally a saxophone solo on this song, also nice guitar. Silky vocals from Bibi. I like this one. Pigma Girl, you have more up-tempo drums than you had to that point. I think the vocals, though, are kind of interesting, more like a spoken word style delivery from Bibi. Scott and Zelda, you have these almost like digital like chime sounds popping in. Sugar Rush, though, as I mentioned, I think one of the highlights of the album for sure. The 808s are really hitting on this, and Bibi's giving you a lot of like attitude and confidence. I think the chorus and the lyricism in general is pretty clever. And yeah, I think this is the closest this album gets to like a traditional like K-pop banger, as you would say. But really, this is an R&B record, so a moment like this, where Bibi is a bit more cocky, it really stands out as a result. The next song, Dare, as you say it, I think just really good synths again, a bit more up-tempo. Burn It, I think this is a really great duet featuring K-pop soloist Dean. I thought his singing was tremendous, honestly, and a nice brief, switch up from Bibi's vocals is because of the different types of singers, the way they go about the music here. Real Man, another curious one. Jazzy production for sure, but then you have these distorted, static-y vocals. Midnight Cruise, another one of the highlights for me. I think the singing from Bibi is excellent, probably her best singing on the album. I love when she goes into that higher register and the song just kind of feels bigger and grander. You have this doubling from these background vocals with Bibi. I think it sounds really good, and it was excellently made. Bam Yang Gang, one of the singles from over a year ago. Interestingly, you have like these like marching band style snares along with some piano. Again, this production is kind of all over the place. Hongdae Gangwon. You have these like snaps, piano, kick drum. Also some of the best singing from Bibi on that one. I really just like the song progression on that song as it goes. Bluebird, a bit of a slower, more acoustic tracks. Same thing with Winter, the final one. So yeah, it's like I think Bibi, she's obviously going for something that's a bit more artistic, more of a cohesive album feel. And despite the fact that the production is pretty varied, I think it all feels pretty congruous as an album, and that's great because we just don't say that about a lot of K-pop music. It certainly comes across as artistic. It does not come across as manufactured. And I think that's pretty cool. Let me know, though, what'd you think of Bibi's second album, Eve Romance? What was your favorite song? And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of PinkPantheress' second mixtape, Fancy That. Pink is back after the debut album at the end of 2023, the first mixtape in 2021. PinkPantheress, UK singer. If you've heard her, you're certainly a fan. You're certainly aware that Pink is a rapidly rising star of the new generation. I still think there's room for Pink to grow in terms of commercial appeal and just general popularity, but despite all that, she has 2 songs approaching 1 billion streams on Spotify with Pain and Boy's a Liar Part 2 with Ice Spice. I was a big fan of Pink's debut album, Heaven Knows, from 2023, and that was the first time she was making music that very much felt and was constructed in more of a traditional setting, and since that album, she has openly expressed that she doesn't even think songs should be past 2.5 minutes long. Most of her biggest hits are short songs, very much like the evolution of the sample. That's very much how she, came up, of course, with TikTok and whatnot. But I like that debut album because it felt like a step forward structurally in terms of her really becoming a serious artist for the first time. And, I think that album actually, in hindsight, and having listened to Fancy That, feels like only a half step forward because Fancy That to me is her best project to date. I think this is honestly quite excellent. Like, if you're a fan of her music, this is tremendous. And 9 songs, only 21 minutes, still very short music, as Pink likes to do. But I feel like there's so much here. PinkPantheress' second mixtape, Fancy That, is the continuation of Pink's sound, club forward, bedroom pop, but truly at this point, UK garage, drum and bass. The production is so impressive because that pulsating groove is always there, but there's so many layers to this. For such a short tape, there's, I think, so much to revisit and enjoy with this production, and the melodies are there and they're not repetitive. Almost every one of those 9 songs does something unique and something fun. There's some really interesting samples on this project that are very much in your face but feel quite creatively used. Pink's ear for melody, as well as song structure, switch ups, and just general changes with the vibe, I think is very clear. It comes across as such a charismatic artist, despite the fact that she's kind of an understated singer most of the time. I just don't know who's doing this type of music better than her right now. The first song, Illegal, I think that synth loop is great, kind of a bop. Again, those understated lyrics on full display here. I think it's a great opener. The second song, Girl Like Me, kind of like a new BPM range from Illegal, but kind of a similar loop, so the vibe still kind of remains. I think the Let It All Go hook, like, is, I think, probably just okay, but I still like the song overall. And then that leads us to Tonight, which was the first single from this. I mean, this is a banger for PinkPantheress. You have like this haunted house-esque violin to open it up. Then we jump in with the beat, and it's just a complete breakbeat, obviously. Pre-chorus is incredibly catchy. I think some of the best singing from Pink is on the chorus to Tonight. And then just, I think, lots of fun lyrical moments. I mean, the Sex is on Fire, Arcade Fire reference, very obvious there. And of course, the Panic at the Disco, Do You Know What I'm Seeing sample on full display as well. I think Tonight's tremendous. It's catchy. It's so fun to revisit. Definitely one of my favorite songs of the year for sure. The next song, Stars, also has a really big sample. It's Just Jack's Stars in Their Eyes. I think that sample is used in a really fun, engaging way, and the tempo of the song is just great. And this, in general, like this whole mixtape just moves at such a pace. Again, for such a short project, only 20 minutes long, there's just so much here to enjoy, and like it never gets dull or stale. We have this intermission interlude, and then you have the song Noises, which I think is the least successful of all these songs. Despite all that, it does have a pretty amusing sample, which is Nardo Wick's Who Wants Smoke. The viral, sound from that, what the fuck is that, from a few years ago. Was not expecting to hear that, but that was pretty funny. Then we have Nice to Know You, which is, I guess, the sequel in theory to Nice to Meet You from the last album, which of course features Central C, one of the biggest songs off the project. This sample, I think, is really fun because like playing with Pink's vocals, you have these like orchestral swells on the beat, the way the drums drop in. Another really good one. Then we have Stateside, which has a music video already, the second single. I actually like this a lot better in sequence. I think when I first heard it as the second single, I was like, well, I like Tonight so much more. I didn't really pay attention to the song that much. But when you listen to Fancy That, I think Stateside really stands out and it's quite good. And then we end with Romeo, which is this epic closer of a song. You have a guitar line for like maybe the first time on the whole tape. You have this playful cadence with the way Pink sings on it. And the beat is just awesome. I love the horns on it. You have this epic chorus. The beat gets even bigger on the chorus. The strings really pop on that. And as the outro happens, you have the background vocals kind of repeating the chorus and going like in tandem with Pink singing. I think it's incredibly impressive song. I love the layering, the depth of the mixing with Romeo. It's great. And yeah, I mean, man, I think this is certainly one of my favorite projects of the year. I had a Heaven Knows on my top 10 albums of 2023, and I think Fancy That is, despite being a project of half the length, I think it's even better. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of my favorite albums of the year. Thus far, that much is clear. I'm going to be revisiting a lot of these songs. I just think the energy that Pink can bring in such a fun, youthful, and yet new way is really pleasurable and fresh. And it's funny to think about where she's fits into the pop firmament these days. I mean, obviously A-list pop stardom went through such a transformation last year, as we talked about with Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan, and older veteran like Charlie XCX really blowing up in the mainstream sense in a way she never did before. Where does PinkPantheress fit into that? I don't think music that is this electronic, this openly indebted to UK genres, I don't think that type of music is going to be like the cream of the crop of pop, but I mean, I think she's absolutely a significant figure when it comes to pop music right now, and is really only, it feels like she's only just getting started. We keep saying that after every project. Every project gets better than the last, but I still feel like there's so much untapped potential still, you know? And if anything's ever going to hold her back, maybe it's vocally, maybe it's because she can be a bit sparse on her own songs, but vocally. But again, her vocals are just one piece of what it means to listen to a Pink Panther song, and yeah, I'm very optimistic. But let me know, what did you think of PinkPantheress' second mixtape, Fancy That? What was your favorite song on the project? Let me know. And for more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here, the review of the Righteous Gemstones Season 4, the fourth and final season of the HBO comedy series, is out now in full. I think I speak for most people who have seen this series, from Danny McBride, David Gordon Green, Jody Hill, that they really enjoyed their time on this ride with the Gemstone family. The Righteous Gemstones is one of the funniest comedy series of the last decade, but season 4 definitely ran out of narrative juice. While the humor was still there, it did feel like we were kind of running out of story to tell. It's definitely a season with the least going on, the least kind of conflict and any sort of real narrative momentum, but it did end, I think, in a pleasing place as a send-off for all these characters. I think the thing people remember most about the Righteous Gemstones is Walton Goggins' off-the-wall performance as Baby Billy, and also Edie Patterson's performance as Judy. Both really all-timers, some of the best comedy work we've seen in recent times. I did want more from Sean William Scott in season 4. I felt like his casting was very clever, but he ultimately had very little to do, certainly less than I expected. Nonetheless, still really happy with the show, and honestly, I'm happy it ended where it did, because clearly it seemed like everyone kind of wanted to move on, but I think it was still a really satisfying watch. When episode 1 obviously was so creative with the flashback, back to the Civil War with the Gemstone ancestor played by Bradley Cooper, the origin for the family grift specifically. Very well done, looked amazing. Cooper was great. And then from there, you kind of pick up the present day story with the characters we already know. And yeah, not a whole lot really goes down. I mean, it seems like the central crux of Righteous Gemstones Season 4 was whether John Goodman was allowed to move on and have a new lover, with his, petulant children getting in the way of that. Like, that was kind of the main source of conflict, right? And obviously you had Kelvin, Adam Devine's character, trying to be winning the righteous man contest, whatever it was called, and going up against the Simpsons, played by Stephen Dorff. Some good stuff there, but again, I don't think anything super really came together. I think a lot of the plots with, like the Gold Bible, where it went, I think a lot of that stuff doesn't really land all that well. Stuff like, Jesse's kids, the conflicts between, Gideon not being a good preacher like his dad, and Pontius rebelling completely against the family norms. And there's definitely room for more of that to happen. Jesse's wife, Amber, played by Cassidy Freeman. I mean, Cassidy Freeman had nothing to do this season. Certainly her, least involved season for that character, unfortunately. I did enjoy some of the Tim Balls stuff with, BJ obviously getting somewhat paralyzed, or at least temporarily, wounded in a wheelchair following the pole dancing mishap at the beginning of the season. And as a result, he has the capuchin monkey as a care animal, and that being a wedge between BJ and Judy. I thought that was pretty funny, and the stuff with the monkey at the end was pretty heartfelt. Obviously, nice to see Kelvin and Keith get married at the very end. I mean, I think just you look back on, the earlier seasons, I think the satirical elements of making fun of, mega church, devout, Christian types, and all of that grifting, that was a lot sharper of a critique, and the humor was really refined. And obviously that's still here, but this is just kind of the characters riffing and playing the hits at this point. And this is a type of show that, I mean, it's been commonly said now that Righteous Gemstones certainly could have went on for a very long time and kind of become an Always Sunny in Philadelphia type of series, where is there much in the way of character growth or meaningful narrative? No, not really, but the vibes, the hang is there the entire time. And I still would love to hang with all these characters. But I do think it was a nice jumping off point. I think Danny McBride has really proven that he is an interesting, creative force, producing force, directing force, in addition to, of course, still being an amazing comedy performer. So we have to be excited about what he does next, and I'm sure HBO will continue to want to be in business with him. And of course, I need to see what Edie Patterson is up to next, because she, of course, was the breakout star of this series. But yeah, let me know. What do you think of Righteous Gemstones Season 4? Were you happy with where it left off, even if the fourth season wasn't the strongest of the show's history? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Mac Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Star Wars Tales of the Underworld, the latest Star Wars animated anthology series out now on Disney+, 6 more episodes. Of course, this follows up Tales of the Empire from last year and the original incarnation, Tales of the Jedi. I think it's become increasingly clear with this project that this stuff is not for Star Wars normies. The goal, artistically, creatively, of the Tales anthology series is clearly to fill in narrative gaps, lore gaps within the Star Wars saga that we already know. As a result, we're spending time with characters that are not super well known to the average fan. Of course, Tales of the Jedi started off with people everyone knows, people everyone likes, Count Dooku and Ahsoka Tano. Tales of the Empire, though, quickly got away from that, featuring Barriss Offee and Morgan Elsbeth. Certainly a step down in terms of recognition, name-wise, character-wise, right? And then Tales of the Underworld, I guess, is perhaps a half step back, where we're now spending time with Asajj Ventress and Cad Bane. The issue with Star Wars Tales of the Underworld is nothing new. This is simply not enough time to spend with any of these characters to feel like any kind of meaningful story has been told. The Cad Bane origin story, for what it was, worked fine, albeit a lot of familiar Western tropes, but I didn't mind it. I thought it was effective. However, the Asajj Ventress story feels like a complete tease given her surprise appearance in The Bad Batch, and while Tales of the Underworld does briefly acknowledge how she came back to life following her death in the Dark Disciple novel, this hardly fills in the gaps between that and her appearance in The Bad Batch. I'm okay with the Tales series very much being for hardcore fans, filling in narrative gaps with characters that the average fan probably doesn't even know. But ultimately, I think we just got our expectations too high following Tales of the Jedi, which featured Count Dooku killing Yaddle during The Phantom Menace. That was tremendous, and we just haven't approached that again in terms of stakes or narrative interest. We just have to remember that the Tales series is supplemental and just treat it for what it is. And I don't have a big problem with that. I think in terms of creativity on the animated front, I look more towards the Star Wars Vision series that I'm very much excited is returning in the fall for season 3, because I think that, because it's not, constrained by the canon of Star Wars, gets to experiment and do a lot of cool stuff. Getting into Tales of the Underworld specifically, I think, again, like Asajj Ventress, she dies off screen in the Dark Disciple novel, which of course was an adaptation of unfilmed Clone Wars scripts, of course, when Clone Wars was canceled the original first time. And that was, I think, a cool, piece of the Clone Wars multimedia project in terms of taking a significant storyline and giving it an end, of course, on the page the way it was. And, since then, Quinlan Vos has appeared in name in terms of the path creation that came to be in the Kenobi series. And I think his relationship with Ventress, again, something that we saw just little bits of in the Clone Wars back in the day, I think could have been ripe for what this series, I think, could have been, right? Because we know Quinlan's out there. We know Asajj Ventress is out there, of course, resurrected in the beginning of Tales of the Underworld. I think that would have been something that more fans would have had some invested interest in versus having her spend time with a, new Padawan who survived Order 66. Nothing super new there. In that first episode, too, you see them fight a unnamed Inquisitor, but a new face. And then, I feel like I bristle a little bit at another new Inquisitor showing up. I feel like those ranks need to be small. I think in general, too, the canon version of the Inquisitors has not been nearly as interesting as the Legends version. I don't usually explicitly make that kind of distinction in terms of canon versus Legends differences, but I think this is one where it's pretty clear and distinct, the differences. And apart from the Grand Inquisitor, as the original villain of Rebels, there hasn't been anything too cool with the Inquisitors. And again, like if we had more time with stuff, I think it would be more interesting, right? Tales of the Empire, Barriss starting out as an Inquisitor, really appealing, but they just move past it so quickly because these are 3-episode arcs and they're short episodes, right? We're talking about 45 minutes for the whole story. I think someone as significant as Asajj Ventress could have used all 6 episodes, and Cad Bane, people like him for what he is, right? A cool badass bounty hunter, right? Like the top gun in town before Boba Fett came of age, right? I think we like Cad, and his appearance in the Book of Boba Fett was pretty cool, despite that show's misgivings. But I don't know if we were clamoring for the Cad Bane origin story, That being said, I thought that stuff was fine. Again, I think it was cool to be on the Duros home planet, and I think the architecture design, a very like 1920s urban setting with the subways on the rails in the sky. Like I think design wise, it was pretty cool. In terms of him and his friend becoming enemies, like you kind of know the beats of it because it's in the past of Cad Bane. It's not like the Morgan Elsbeth Tales of the Empire stuff where there's this huge unknown, or Barriss Offee where her fate was unknown. There was so much theorizing about what happened to her that actually made sense to answer it in a certain way. Asajj, though, it's like you bring her back when you thought she was dead with no explanation in the Bad Batch. And it's like, I'm not worried about it being explained and having my hand held with stuff like that, right? I thought she came back somehow cool. And they explain it, and I think in a perfectly reasonable way. Dark, Night Sister magic on Dathomir. That's why she came back. She got resurrected somehow by Talzin. Cool. That's good enough for me. But what is the character going to be now? Because that's another Force user, another person swinging a lightsaber during the dark times. And I feel like that's something that you need to tread lightly with, So I'm curious. It's like, what is next? Like, is this just like a soft intro for the next animated Star Wars series featuring, we assume, Omega from the Bad Batch and her relationship with Ventress at the very end of the Bad Batch? Is that where we're going? Is that what this was? There's got to be something, right? Because otherwise, why would you bring her back for nothing too significant? So, yeah, again, like I think like these shows, these anthology series, more often than not, we want more time with who we're spending time with. Otherwise, it just feels thin because, again, it's just not a lot of time spent. And like again, I look back to Dooku in Tales of the Jedi and like having Yaddle's fate be determined, and then Yaddle's death during the Phantom Menace. Like seeing all of that, like I think that was like transcendent stuff. Similar to how Clone Wars Season 7 takes place during the events of Revenge of the Sith at the very end there, right? Like, that kind of stuff is amazing. And that's like fucking catnip for fans, right? In terms of true lore filling in. I love that kind of stuff. Barriss Offee's fate being explained a bit more, fine, happy with it, right? But then like Cad Bane's origin, what's up with Morgan Elsbeth, there's not stuff that's that interesting. If you're picking nits about the subjects. So honestly, if I'm thinking more about it, I would love to just go back to like Tales of the Jedi again, like talk about Jedi subjects again. Yeah, like those are the characters I want to spend the most time with, right? So, and I think like prequel era stuff, Clone Wars era stuff is probably the coolest. Like, I think the layup with all of this is Sifo Dyas. Do the Sifo Dyas story. That would be cool. We know the beats of it, but just seeing more of that would be cool. That's my pitch for the next Tales, Sifo Dyas. But let me know, what do you think of Tales of the Underworld? Do you agree that it's okay for what it is, but deserves more attention to have more effective narratives? Do you wish different characters were being focused on? What do you think of it? Where do you feel about Star Wars animated projects right now? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, more Star Wars reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with the review of Andor Season 2. The final season is out in full on Disney+. Man, there's so much to get into with this Star Wars series. I'm going to recap the finale and also, of course, just talk about the impact and legacy of what this series will mean and how this second season has gone. There's so much to talk about. So we're going to get into all of that. Andor is an undeniable masterpiece at this point. It's so grounded in real life, whether that's character motivations, character struggles, just the actual movement of plot. When you have a truly cracked writer's room with Tony Gilroy and Beau Willimon, unsurprisingly, the dialogue truly crackles, but I remain incredibly impressed with the depth of the themes of this series. They successfully took a prequel to the prequel, Rogue One, and imbued it with so much tension and stress on the part of the viewer. It's just an impressive feat. The creation of the Luthen and Kleia characters is incredible stuff. They'll go down as some of the best characters of the Disney Star Wars era. And Cassian Andor himself is now one of the great Star Wars characters. And it really is all thanks to this strength of the storytelling on this show. The grittiness, the depth, the variety of rebellion, the unglamorous work, it lands because it's something real, it's something true. And I almost felt a sense of dread watching the finale because I knew the precious minutes were almost up with this story. Season 2 to me is a big step up from Season 1, which is a hard thing to even process. Like, how was that even possible? But I thought, but Season 2 truly did not, put a foot wrong. There's so much to get into. So, I think we'll just kind of talk about it at a high level and then kind of go through some various plots and arcs. I think structurally, the idea of doing, every week a 3-episode drop, and each of those 3-episode arcs was 1 year closer to the Battle of Yavin. So we're moving forward a year each week. I thought that honestly really worked. I'm always a advocate for the week-to-week release in lieu of a binge. The Bear Season 4 is going to be released in full next month. Still baffling decision. Something like Andor, I actually thought this was really clever because these 3-episode arcs really work all together. And I think, a lot of times maybe the first episode in that arc was a lot more of setting and reestablishing where we were with all the time that's passed and the plot that's happened. And then obviously things kick into high gear with that second and third episode. I think all of that was quite clever. It's talking about, the characters at a higher level, right? I mean, there's, I think, so many plots and all of them really work and communicate different things, right? You have Andor, and Andor at times feels like a pawn in the greater story, right? There's big parts of the storytelling in Andor Season 2 that doesn't even involve Cassian. And I think that speaks to, I think, one of the most effective aspects of this was with the depth and murkiness of what it means to rebel against a galactic empire, right? You have the clear conflict between Luthen and the Masasi group, on Yavin, right? The rebels that we've historically always known. And the way they just kind of introduce Yavin in this season, first at the very beginning when Cassian gets unknowingly stranded there temporarily, and then when we just kind of come into the base in media res as we have always known it. And meanwhile, you have Luthen with his scheming and his true spycraft, on Coruscant and wherever else he's going, and the conflict between those, right? As Mon Mothma tries to, play the middle. Someone like Bail Organa has his different views of things. I thought that was really done impressively well because they don't do it with overt plot so much. They really just have the characters go in different directions. Right? You have Cassian, who obviously is embedded as a Luthen agent and eventually decides to leave and join up with the Yavin group. Then you have someone like Will, who was much more, radicalized in a certain sense, working for Luthen, doing stuff with Saw Gerrera in the middle of the season. And they just have different views of what it means to do the work, what it means to get stuff done. And, they just pay all that off as you go. I mean, the finale did a great job of that, right? You have Saw arguing with the Rebel Council via hologram from Jeddah, obviously where we know he meets his end in Rogue One, and there's just a difference of opinion, a difference of tactic in terms of being productive with something like this, right? And you see it with Kleia's reaction when Melshi and Andor are trying to rescue her from Coruscant, that she has this aversion to even going to Yavin because she feels so distant and alien to that side of the rebel cause. I mean, I just really like that because it was just such an impressive and consistent through line that, again, has a lot of depth. There's so much gray area on this show. I mean, you get it again with a lot of the Gorman stuff, right? When we first get introduced to the Gorman front, they get written off by people like Andor as inexperienced, in over their heads, not ready for it, right? And then Vel, begrudgingly decides to kind of train him up. And then you have someone like Luthen who's kind of seeing the whole chessboard hovering above it all, who doesn't even care necessarily about their competence because, throwing kerosene on the fire is a net positive for the overall galactic cause. I mean, it's also good. I also was really impressed with what they did with like some characters' thoughts on legacy, right? I think the Cyril Karn arc is actually very impressive because I think Cyril from the jump was always a character that was probably not everyone's favorite just because the guy's kind of a tough hang. He gets walked over by his mother, and then we realize that he's kind of, shacked up in a certain sense with Dedra at the start of season 2, and she's doing something similar. Meanwhile, he has such a self-importance, such a sense of needing to make a name for himself and accomplishment, and make accomplishments. And it's just in such a stark contrast to what he's actually done and how he's actually perceived by everyone around him. And there is a sense of empathy for Cyril's plight, if you could call it that. I think it's handled with a lot of care because it's like such a messy type of character. And I mean, I think the way it ends is kind of brilliant, right? Where he's effectively a pawn of the Empire on Gorman, where he thinks he's helping root out outside agitators, when in reality he is in fact the outside agitator the entire time. And then, when everything hits the fan and he goes after Cassian doesn't even know who he is before Cyril meets his end. I mean, I thought it was kind of just perfect for how that character should have went, to be honest. And on the other side of things, I think you have the Dedra arc, right? Where, I mean, talk about like an Imperial character that has really stood out like few can. I mean, obviously we've been around a lot of Imperials over the Star Wars storytelling, right? And there's a good amount of them in this, right? Of course, the iconic Orson Krennic from Rogue One, played by Ben Mendelsohn, makes his return in a handful of great scenes in season 2, which is very welcome. And Partagaz, the head of the ISB, aka a Kyber from Game of Thrones, also a great performance. But Dedra, her sense of ambition comes across, I think, quite well. I think the character is really well honed over the course of this show, and the way Dedra meets her end, where she truly gets, sidelined and locked up by the Empire for just a lack of respect for the chain of command. It feels so real, and her recklessness, her quest for glory and getting all the credit for something she'd been working towards the entire time, of course, finding and rooting out the Axis, as she called it, the spy network that Luthen and Andor were a part of. Her quick trigger ends up kind of blowing it because she isn't able to capture Luthen correctly. He gets injured by suicide attempt, of course, and then Clay is able to finish the job and prevent him from being exposed as a wealth of knowledge for the Empire to interrogate about the rebel cause. I mean, what happens with Dedra, I think, was great. I mean, the conversation that we have in the finale between her and Krennic, where I think I wrote it down, Krennic had an amazing line to her, if you're not a rebel spy, you missed your calling. I mean, God, so much venom, right? And obviously, Mendelsohn knows how to have a line delivery. In general, I mean, again, such a crack writing team. I mean, the show doesn't waste any lines. It also doesn't really hold your hand, right? There's lots of like subtle storytelling, and maybe they'll remind you something with the recap stuff in the beginning of each episode. But like whether it's Melshi's character or the revelation about how certain information gets to people, like how Luthen learned that Bail Organa's team was compromised by the ISB, told by handfuls of lines over the course of an episode or two, but never explicitly telling you this is how Luthen knows that thing, but it's there if you pay attention. It just speaks to, I think, the strength of the writing and the strength of the show, where you don't need to be like with your pen and paper writing things down with this show, but it's also going to keep moving at a brisk pace. Everything with Gorman I thought was truly spectacular. Obviously the sets were gorgeous, and in general I thought the show looked incredible, right? Whether it was Trandrilla in the beginning, everything on Gorman, the ISB stuff on Coruscant, the safe house on Coruscant, Luthen's Antiquities Gallery, the farming planet in the beginning, was it Morcana, however you say it. Everywhere you go, the show looks fantastic. And if you think about it too, it's like there's such an economy to how like the visual storytelling works, because the Gorman stuff, it's truly only in a few locations that we spend time. It's that central square, the ISB building on site, the hotel on site, and like the underground, like, you know, resistance bunker. That's kind of it, right? But because the show was shot on location, shot, you know, at Pinewood, like in a traditional studio on sets, and not shot on the volume like The Mandalorian, it just looks so much more realized, and this looks great. You know, obviously the costume design is also spectacular. Cinematography, the color grading, like it's so visually impressive and just pops the way few streaming shows really do. But the Gorman stuff, I thought, again, was so sophisticated, because, I mean, there's so many parallels to, like, French resistance style storytelling. Obviously, there's lots of movies and novels about, you know, the French resistance, but specifically during World War II, and that's a kind of obvious callback. Of course, the Empire themselves, a very overt Nazi reference, you know, since the 70s, from the very beginning, obviously. But with the Gorman stuff, right, I think, like, the push-pull of what type of rebels they want to be with their leader versus the younger people involved. All of that I thought was really good. Cassian's ambivalence to their individual plight, Luthen's desire for things to pop off regardless. But then, like, the truly haunting stuff is, like, you know, you see in the beginning where the Empire, including Krennic, they have this plan to extract the mineral in Gorman, and they set in motion a years-long propaganda campaign and front for justification to raise the planet. And, you know, watching that episode, which is a callback to when the Nazis planned the final solution, Tony Gilroy has said as much. I thought that scene is kind of terrifying to watch. But then just seeing all the Gorman storytelling proceed, when you're just watching the manipulation happen in real time. And it's kind of heartbreaking stuff, because, again, you spend enough time with all those characters, and I think it's done with enough nuance that, like, you really feel for it, but you're just watching this chess game be played when the other player has one hand behind their back and they don't even know it. I mean, I thought it was really incredible stuff. And I mean, when the KX units, when the K2SO droids get launched on them, the Empire decides to finally massacre everyone. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying stuff. But really effective and, again, visually very impressive. Was it episode 9 when Cassian rescues Mon Mothma from the Senate after she gives her, you know, iconic speech, a speech famous in the lore of Star Wars, where she basically announces the rebellion and renounces Palpatine, and then she has to escape, of course, for her life. That was fucking like a Jason Bourne movie, right? I mean, the show has so much awesome spycraft the entire time, but that was effectively like an action spy extended set piece. And Cassian is now, again, even further an essential rebel figure in Star Wars history because of that key thing. And you even get the Easter egg reference where he's going to hand her off to Gold Squadron for delivery to Yavin, which, of course, Gold Squadron is the characters in the Star Wars Rebels. We saw that stuff happen, that handoff happen on the animated series, you know, several years ago at this point. But I think the tension, you know, just the kinetic energy of how everything moves with that rescue attempt, and again, the show is able to communicate so much tension and so much buildup with how it goes about its storytelling. I thought that all that stuff was awesome. And even everything with Mon Mothma as a character, right? Where even though she's giving that speech, she's almost appalled watching Cassian kill people to rescue her. And she almost, to that point, I felt like she could kind of be above the grittiness of the rebellion, right? You have that line where, you know, Luthen alludes to having someone killed on behalf of Mon, And Luthen says to Mon, how nice for you, when she said she couldn't fathom such a thing or whatever, right? Like, again, like another thing where there's so much depth and so much nuance and also like true character progression over the course of the show and over the course of the season. It's just great stuff. I think the Bix stuff really works too. Adria Arjona has a tough job on the series because Bix is largely sidelined for a lot of it as someone who's kind of struggling with the challenges of being a rebel, being someone who has to hide and move around all the time, and watching her in that safe house, the Luthen safe house, and clearly develop some kind of substance dependency, right? And the conversations that her and Cassian have, then her ultimate decision to leave in order for Cassian to do what he does best, which is be of service to the greater cause. I thought all that really worked. I mean, her leaving at the end I thought was really heartbreaking. And then you get the reveal at the very end, the final shot of the season, which was that Bix also was leaving to protect their unborn baby, which of course she later has, which we see in the final scene. I mean, I really enjoyed the Bix stuff. I thought, again, Adria Arjona had a tough task, right? Because she doesn't have a lot of action set pieces, in the series. I thought she's definitely more involved with some like big plot in season 1, but I still think that the character worked in season 2. We do, of course, learn how Cassian comes to meet K2SO, of course, the Imperial KX unit. We actually see that they, get K2SO after K2 is launched, set loose on the Gormans during the massacre. We watch K2 murder countless innocents before he gets effectively taken back to Yavin after being, broken down during the conflict, and they bring him back to life. And then, of course, Alan Tudyk gets to reprise the role. And even though K2 was really only in like 3.25 episodes on this season, God, he makes such an impression once again. I think the performance from Tudyk is tremendous, but also just the way the droid works, where he just has a certain humor, a certain dryness to the line deliveries, the kind of classic droid humor, right? Where like they're a robot and there's things about humans that they don't quite grasp or amuse them as they can be amused. I mean, everything with K2 is pretty funny. He has some great stuff in terms of killing Imperials during the finale as well. Really happy that we got a little bit of that time. And yeah, I mean, we just have to like talk about the finale, right? Where the show is able to give you so much tension about whether the rebels will get the information of the Death Star. Like, honestly, it's kind of like mind-blowing to me that you had, of course, Rogue One be this epic movie about how the rebels actually got the Death Star plans, how they got those plans to Leia that she has at the very beginning of Star Wars A New Hope, the first thing you see in Star Wars, right? Well, now Andor is able to communicate how the rebels even knew about the Death Star to then attempt to get those plans that we see in Rogue One. So it's the prequel to the prequel, as we've always been saying, but it's actually like essential Star Wars lore, essential Star Wars storytelling. And it's kind of mind-blowing because the show is made in such an incredible way where you have all this tension about whether they can pull it off, even though you know deep down that they do succeed. Like, we just have to say, like, Clea forever. Like, Clea in this last 3 episodes, iconic stuff. I mean, the performance is amazing. And I want to shout out the actress Elizabeth Dulau, who was making her acting debut as Clea right out of drama school for this role. She's awesome, and like the way her character makes a bigger and bigger impression over the course of season 2, after very much being in support of Luthen, narratively speaking, with season 1. And, I mean, so good. I mean, learning about her backstory and how her and Luthen met, and slowly built up the Antiquities business, and became some of the first nascent rebels, one of the various rebel cells at the time, and all that. I mean, was so good. I mean, I watching, like, once you realize the ball's in motion, right? Once you see Lonnie have the emergency meeting with Luthen, where he is able to learn about the existence of the Death Star and understanding the true scope of the Imperial propaganda in terms of Gorman and Jedha and what they're really making. And it's all, again, because of Dedra's blind ambition that she had information she wasn't supposed to have, and Lonnie was able to steal it and find all this out. And then there's a race against time to get that information out. And I love how tactical and effortful full something like that is, where Clea and Luthen know about the Death Star program, and it's a pain to get that out when you're under the Empire's nose on Coruscant. And of course, it cost Luthen his life, and it nearly cost Clea hers, as well as her mental health. I mean, it's just riveting stuff. Honestly, I thought of the iconic Mon Mothma line in Return of the Jedi, where she says many Bothans died to bring us this information. Of course, that's a reference to the second Death Star, but again, it very much applies to Death Star 1. Many rebels died to bring us this information, just bring you the information, just to pull it off. The intelligence of the series is just so mind-blowing. And man, obviously Tony Gilroy is not making more Star Wars. He said as much. He wants to move on. But the fact that you had, I think, such, not just competence, but excellence behind the scenes from someone who actually isn't like an avowed Star Wars fan. It's like Tony Gilroy is not a Dave Filoni. He's just a screenwriting legend, ghostwriting legend at this point, right? And they, making something Star Wars for adults is what people have always said about Andor, but it's just true. And I mean, if you're gonna have any quibble about this show, there's not that many aliens on it. It's a lot of human characters. From a lore perspective, maybe it stands out a little bit, but I mean, the minorest of notes at this point doesn't matter, right? You still get tons of fun Easter eggs. I mean, heck, we got Admiral Raddus again in the finale, which was so fun, right? R.I.P. my guy. You wish that we could have so many Andors, right? You wish Star Wars was in a healthy place storytelling wise, where there was multiple projects going, the movie business was consistent, and then they could make stuff like Andor, which is not as popular as The Mandalorian, but that's not a big deal, right? Star Wars is so vast and so open, again, in theory, as we always say, but in practice it hasn't been. But I think honestly too, it's hats off that they were able to make something so compelling, so rich, and so fresh about, within a very specific part in Star Wars canon, right? I mean, there's a lot of Star Wars lore beats that they had to abide to in the telling of Andor, and they pulled it off, I think, beyond our wildest expectations. I mean, it's just an absolute gift, and who knows when we'll feel this way about Star Wars or an IP series again. But yeah, Andor Season 2, obviously that was a really long-winded thing for me. I could talk about the show forever. Really tremendous stuff. I think it's my favorite show of the year thus far. I have it slotted at number 1 on my list. We'll see how that shakes out come December. Come back for that. But yeah, let me know, how did you feel about Andor Season 2? What stood out to you most about it? Obviously, there's so much depth, so much to discuss, so much to like. Let me know what you liked most about it. And for more TV reviews, more Star Wars reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. All right, that's going to do for the pod this week. Next week, we got a ton to get into. Hurry Up Tomorrow, The Weeknd's new film from Trey Edward Schultz with Jenna Ortega. New music from Rico Nasty, Amine, Jin of BTS, Idol. Also, the conclusion of The Studio, Season 1 on Apple TV+, and the new comedy film Friendship from Tim Robinson. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, see links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good, and I'll see you next week.